The desert wind moved slowly across the open land, carrying dust and the weight of something final. The sun hovered low, painting the sky in shades of red and gold, as if the earth itself was preparing to mourn. Beneath a struggling cottonwood tree lay Chief Redhawk, the aging Apache leader whose strength had once been feared across the plains. Now his breathing was shallow, each breath sounding like it might be his last. Around him stood his people in silence, warriors and elders alike, their faces carved with grief. Among them was a man who did not belong, a lone cowboy named Ethan Cole. His hat in his hands, his boots worn thin by a life of wandering. Years earlier, when blood had stained the canyon rocks, Ethan had pulled Redhawk from the path of certain death. No reward had been asked for, and none had been given. Yet debts in Apache law were not forgotten. As Redhawk's eyes slowly opened, they fixed not on his warriors, but on Ethan. A murmur passed through the crowd. The chief raised his trembling hand, signaling for silence, and in a voice barely stronger than the wind, he spoke words that froze every heart present. By ancient custom and final will, his two wives, Ayanna and Nita, were to be entrusted to the cowboy standing before him. Shock rippled through the circle. Ayanna's eyes flashed with disbelief and anger, her posture rigid, her jaw set like stone. She was fire, strong, proud, and unyielding. Nita stood just behind her, silent tears tracing lines down her face, her grief deep and quiet like still water under moonlight. Neither woman had expected this fate, and neither had chosen it. Ethan felt the ground shift beneath him. He had faced gunfights and storms, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Redhawk's hand fell back to the earth as his final breath escaped into the fading light. A deep, mournful cry rose from the tribe, echoing across the plains. In that moment, Ethan understood the truth of what had happened. He had not inherited wealth or comfort. He had inherited responsibility, danger, and a future tied to a people who did not yet trust him. Eyes watched him from every direction, some filled with hope, others with quiet hatred. As night crept over the desert and the firelight flickered, Ethan realized his life as a wandering cowboy had ended. What stood before him now was a trial that could either cost him his life or change it forever. The days after the chief's death were heavy with tension, as if the air itself refused to settle. Ethan remained in the Apache camp, sleeping little, always aware of the eyes following his every move. He felt like a man standing on the edge of a knife, knowing one wrong step could draw blood. Ayanna and Nita stayed near each other, bound by grief, but divided by their nature. Ayanna met Ethan's presence with open hostility, her words sharp and her gaze unflinching, as though daring him to prove he deserved to breathe the same air as her people. Nita, however, spoke rarely, watching him from a distance, her silence louder than any accusation. Ethan tried to do what he believed was right. He told them he would not force Apache law upon them, that they were free to leave if they wished. Ayanna laughed at his offer, but there was no humor in it. She told him freedom was not so simple. Without a chief and without protection, the tribe was vulnerable, and two widowed women would be hunted like prey. If Ethan left, he would be abandoning them to a fate worse than death. Her words struck deeper than any insult, and for the first time, Ethan felt the true weight of what Redhawk had placed on his shoulders. The warriors of the tribe watched him closely, testing him in small ways. They gave him the hardest work, the worst food, and the coldest looks. Some whispered that a white man could never honor Apache ways. Others believed Redhawk's spirit would curse them all if Ethan failed. Each night Ethan lay awake, listening to distant drums and wondering if he would survive long enough to see another sunrise. As days passed, danger crept closer. Scouts returned with troubling news. White settlers were moving nearby, drawn by rumors of unguarded land and Apache weakness. Ethan knew these men. He had ridden with their kind before and understood their hunger for gold and power. The knowledge settled in his chest like a stone. This was no longer about tradition or inheritance. It was about survival. Slowly, almost without noticing, Ethan began to change. He learned the rhythms of the camp, the unspoken rules, the meaning behind gestures and silence. He stood watch at night, without being asked, and shared his supplies without complaint. Ayana noticed his endurance, even if she refused to admit it. Nita noticed something else, the way he never looked at them with ownership. Only concern. By the time the desert winds shifted again, all three of them understood the truth. Whatever fate awaited them, none of them would be walking away. The attack came just before dawn, when the desert was quiet enough to hear a man's heartbeat. A sharp crack of a rifle shattered the silence, followed by screams and the thunder of hooves. Flames leapt into the sky as gunmen stormed the edge of the Apache camp, firing wildly and laughing as tents collapsed in smoke and sparks. Chaos spread like wildfire. Warriors scrambled for weapons. Women pulled children into the shadows. And the sacred ground that had known peace only hours before was soaked in fear. Ethan was on his feet before his mind caught up with the sound. Instinct took over. He grabbed his rifle and ran toward the gunfire instead of away from it. Years on the frontier had taught him how men like these fought. Loud, careless, and cruel. He moved with purpose, taking cover, firing only when he knew his shot would count. An attacker fell, then another. The shock on their faces said everything. They had not expected resistance. They had not expected a cowboy to stand with the Apache. Near the center of the camp, Nita stumbled as smoke blinded her. A gunshot rang out, and Ethan threw himself between her and the bullet. Pain exploded in his shoulder, burning and deep, but he stayed on his feet, dragging her to safety behind a fallen wagon. She pressed her hands against his wound, her face pale with fear. Whispering words he did not understand, but felt all the same. Blood soaked his sleeve, yet he rose again when he heard Ayana's voice cry out in defiance. Ayana was surrounded by three attackers, her knife flashing as she fought like a storm. Ethan charged without thinking, swinging the rifle, firing once at point-blank range. The remaining men fled, terror replacing arrogance as they vanished into the desert. By the time the sun rose fully, the attackers were gone, leaving behind bodies, smoke, and silence heavy with loss. The tribe gathered as the fires died down. Wounded men were tended, and the dead were honored with quiet respect. Ethan sat on the ground, dizzy from blood loss, as an elder stepped forward. In a voice steady and clear, he spoke of courage, of debt repaid in blood, and of the spirit of Red Hawk watching over them. For the first time, no one looked at Ethan as an outsider. Ayana met his gaze, her anger softened by something like respect. Nita knelt beside him, her hand resting gently on his uninjured arm. On that sacred ground, amid ashes and dawn light, a bond was forged that no tradition alone could have created. The weeks after the attack passed slowly, marked by healing and quiet reflection. The camp no longer looked at Ethan with suspicion, but with something closer to trust. Children followed him as he worked, elders nodded when he passed, and the warriors spoke to him as one of their own. Yet inside him a storm still raged. He knew that respect earned in battle did not give him the right to decide the lives of two women bound to him by an old law he did not fully believe in. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in deep amber, Ethan asked for the tribe to gather. The fire crackled softly as everyone formed a wide circle. Ayana stood tall and proud, her wounds healed, but her spirit unchanged. Nita stood beside her, calm and observant, her eyes reflecting the flames. Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady despite the weight in his chest. He told them he would not keep what was given by force or tradition alone. He said the women owed him nothing, and that he was prepared to leave the tribe with supplies and protection, if that was what they wished. His words stirred murmurs among the people, confusion mixing with surprise. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Ayana moved toward him. Her voice was firm but no longer sharp. She said freedom was not running from responsibility, but choosing where one belonged. She reminded him that he had fought for them, bled for them, and stayed when he could have fled. Nita followed, her words quiet yet powerful. She said she had seen his heart in moments when no one was watching, in the way he guarded the weak and honored the dead. Choice, she said, was not about escape but about trust. The elders listened carefully before giving their blessing. The old law was fulfilled, not through ownership, but through consent and unity. That night the fire burned late, and for the first time since Red Hawk's death, Laughter echoed softly across the camp. Ethan chose to stay, not as a wandering cowboy, but as a man rooted in something greater than himself. He helped the tribe rebuild, teaching them what he knew of the settlers' ways, while learning more of their traditions. Over time, the camp became a bridge between two worlds, once divided by fear and blood. Stories spread across the desert of a cowboy who had inherited two wives, but claimed neither by force. Instead, he earned a place among them through honor, sacrifice, and choice. And in that choice, a new future quietly began.